40 million people. That's 11% of everyone alive on Earth in the year 1200. Gone. Dead. Erased from existence by the hands of one man. His name was Temujin. You know him as Genghis Khan. History calls him a great conqueror, a military genius, a unifier of nations. History lies. What I'm about to show you isn't the sanitized version they teach in schools. This isn't about brave warriors on horseback building an empire. This is about the most systematic campaign of human extermination the world had ever seen. By the time this man drew his last breath, entire civilizations had been wiped from the face of the earth. Cities that had stood for 1,000 years became mass graves. Rivers ran red for months. The screams echoed across continents. Today, you'll discover how one abandoned boy became humanity's greatest monster. How he built a machine designed for one purpose: killing every living soul that refused to kneel. This is the real story of Genghis Khan. And once you hear it, you'll never think of conquest the same way again. The year was 1162. On the frozen steppes of Mongolia, a child was born who would reshape the world through blood and terror. His name was Temujin. But this wasn't the birth of a hero. This was the birth of something else entirely. Temujin's father, Yasujii, was a minor tribal chief, powerful enough to have enemies, not powerful enough to protect his family from them. When Temujin was just 9 years old, his father made a fatal mistake. He accepted hospitality from the Tatars, the same tribe that had been feuding with his clan for generations. They poisoned him. Yasujii died in agony, his body convulsing as the toxins destroyed him from within. And with his death, everything changed for young Temujin. The tribe abandoned them, a woman and her children, left to starve on the merciless steppes. No food, no protection, no future. Most children would have died. Temujin learned to kill. He was 13 when he murdered his half-brother Bektar. Not in battle, not in self-defense. He killed him because Bektar had stolen a fish. A single fish. Temujin and his full brother Kharash hunted Bektar down like an animal. They found him sitting on a hill, alone and defenseless. Temujin drew his bow. His brother begged for mercy. Temujin put an arrow through his heart. When they returned home, their mother Holun was horrified. She screamed at them, calling them murderers, destroyers of their own blood. But Temujin felt no remorse, only satisfaction. He had eliminated a rival. He had shown strength. This wasn't normal childhood aggression. This was something cold, calculated. The first glimpse of the monster he would become. By 1196, Temujin had begun his rise to power. But he didn't unite the tribes through diplomacy or marriage alliances like other leaders. He united them through terror. His first act of mass murder came against the very people who had killed his father. The Tatars. When he finally captured 70 of their chiefs, he didn't simply execute them. He wanted them to suffer as his father had suffered. He ordered massive cauldrons to be filled with water. Fires were lit underneath until the water reached a rolling boil. Then, one by one, the Tatar chiefs were lowered into the cauldrons. Alive, their screams carried across the steppes for hours. Some tribes that heard those screams immediately surrendered. Others tried to run. None escaped. This was when Temujin created his decimal system. Not just a military organization, it was a killing machine. Groups of 10, 100,000, 10,000. Each unit designed for maximum efficiency in warfare. Maximum efficiency in death. Every soldier knew the rule. Submit or die. Surrender meant slavery. Resistance meant extermination. There was no third option. By 1206, the tribes had a choice. Follow the man who boiled his enemies alive, or join them in the cauldrons. They chose to follow. And Temujin took a new name, Genghis Khan, universal ruler. The monster was fully grown, and he was ready to feed. If you're horrified by what you've heard so far, you need to subscribe to Throne of Lies. We're the only channel brave enough to expose these buried truths. Help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers so we can keep bringing you the dark history they don't want you to know. Hit that subscribe button because the truth about power needs to be told. What Genghis Khan created wasn't just an army. It was a machine designed to erase civilizations from existence. Other conquerors throughout history took cities, claimed territory, demanded tribute. Khan did something different. He eliminated the concept of civilians entirely. In his mind, there were only two types of people: those who submitted completely and those who needed to die. Every man, woman, child, and infant in a resisting city became a legitimate target for extermination. His siege tactics reveal the depth of his cruelty. When approaching a walled city, Khan's forces would capture everyone in the surrounding villages: farmers, merchants, children, the elderly. Then they would drive these terrified civilians ahead of the army like cattle. The defenders on the walls faced an impossible choice: kill their own people to slow the Mongol advance, or watch helplessly as the human shields filled their defensive moats with bodies. Either way, the psychological damage was devastating. But Khan's most chilling innovation was something his army called the measuring. After capturing a city, Mongol soldiers would bring wagon wheels and line up every survivor. Anyone taller than the wheel, man, woman, or child, was immediately executed. Only the shortest survived. Only those too small to ever pose a threat. In 1219, Khan turned his attention to the Khwarezmian Empire. What followed was 24 months of systematic extermination across Central Asia. It began in Otrar, where the governor had made the mistake of killing Mongol merchants. When Khan's forces finally breached the city walls, they dragged the governor to the town square. They had prepared something special for him: molten silver, poured slowly down his throat while he was still alive. The governor's screams echoed through the burning city as the liquid metal destroyed him from the inside. But this was just the beginning. At Bokhara, Khan's engineers needed to fill the defensive moats before they could assault the walls. Instead of using earth or stones, they used people. Thousands of captured residents were driven at spear point toward the water. Those who refused were cut down. Those who obeyed drowned under the weight of bodies piled on top of them. The moats filled. The assault began. Samarkand surrendered without a fight, hoping for mercy. They received none. Khan ordered every single resident, all 50,000 men, women, and children, to be buried alive in mass graves outside the city walls. The digging took days. The screaming took longer. But it was at Nishapur where Khan revealed the true scope of his hatred for humanity itself. His beloved son-in-law had been killed during the siege of this city. In response, Khan issued an order that defied comprehension: kill everything that breathes. Not just humans. Every dog, every cat, every bird, every insect. The Mongol soldiers spent weeks systematically exterminating every form of life they could find. They counted heads to ensure compliance. Over 1,700,000 human skulls were stacked in pyramids outside the ruined city. Nishapur became a literal dead zone. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. Even the rats were gone. During the Jin Dynasty campaign in northern China, the scale of brutality reached new heights. At Zhongdu, modern-day Beijing, Khan's forces discovered that starving the population wasn't killing them fast enough. So they developed a new form of terror. 60,000 young women were dragged to the city walls. One by one, they were thrown from the ramparts onto the rocks below. The executions continued for days. The sound of bodies hitting stone became so constant that people in the city below stopped looking up. The psychological impact was immediate. Entire populations began fleeing before the Mongols even arrived. But fleeing wasn't enough to save them. Khan encouraged cannibalism among the starving refugees. His forces would surround fleeing populations, cut off their food supplies, then wait. When hunger drove them to desperation, they began eating their dead. Then their dying. Then each other. This served Khan's purposes perfectly. Communities that resorted to cannibalism could never trust each other again. Social bonds dissolved. Resistance became impossible. The most efficient tool in Khan's arsenal wasn't his cavalry or his siege engines. It was human cattle. Captured civilians were driven ahead of the army by the hundreds of thousands. When they reached enemy territory, these desperate masses would overwhelm the defending forces through sheer numbers. If the human cattle broke through enemy lines, Khan's real army could advance. If they were slaughtered, Khan learned about enemy defensive capabilities. Either outcome served his purposes. The survivors of these campaigns faced something worse than death. They became property. Khan established slavery networks that stretched across 3 continents. Engineers and artisans were shipped thousands of miles from their homelands to build siege engines for future conquests. Scribes and scholars were forced to document the administrative details of their own people's extermination. Children were separated from parents at the moment of capture. Boys over 10 were trained as soldiers and forced to kill members of their own ethnic groups. Girls became concubines and breeding stock for Mongol officers. Khan's forces maintained detailed records of bloodlines and genetic compatibility. They weren't just enslaving populations. They were systematically breeding new generations of slaves optimized for different purposes. Stronger backs for manual labor. More attractive features for sexual slavery. Higher intelligence for administrative tasks. This wasn't random cruelty. This was industrial-scale human engineering conducted with the efficiency of a slaughterhouse and the cold calculation of a business enterprise. By 1220, Khan's machine had perfected the art of erasing civilizations so completely that archaeologists today still struggle to find traces of cities that once housed hundreds of thousands of people. The world had never seen anything like it, and the worst was yet to come. The numbers are almost impossible to believe, but they're real. China in the year 1200, 120 million people. After Genghis Khan and his successors finished their work, 60 million. Half the population. Gone. Central Asia before the Mongols. 15 million souls living in thriving cities along the Silk Road. After the campaigns, 1.7 million survivors scattered across a wasteland. 90% extermination rate. Iran, the jewel of the Islamic world, 2.5 million people reduced to just 250,000. 9 out of every 10 people erased from existence. When you add up every region, every campaign, every systematic massacre, the total reaches 40 million human beings. 40 million fathers who never came home. 40 million mothers who watched their children die. 40 million lives cut short by one man's hunger for absolute control. To put this in perspective, the Holocaust killed 6 million people, and we correctly remember it as one of humanity's greatest crimes. Genghis Khan killed nearly 7 times that number using 13th century technology. This wasn't the random brutality of undisciplined soldiers. Khan had systematized murder itself. He called it the Kharash system, a methodical approach to depopulation that treated human extermination like a mathematical problem to be solved. Every Mongol unit received specific quotas, kill counts that had to be met before moving to the next target. Soldiers carried bags to collect ears as proof of their kills. At the end of each day, officers would count the ears to ensure quotas were being met. Entire cities were divided into sections, with different Mongol units assigned to clear each area systematically. House by house, room by room, closet by closet. No one could hide. No one could escape. The mass graves from this period stretch for miles across the Asian steppes. Archaeological surveys using ground-penetrating radar have revealed burial sites containing tens of thousands of bodies stacked like cordwood. Some graves are so large that excavation teams have been working on them for decades and still haven't reached the bottom. But Khan's genius for destruction went beyond simple murder. He weaponized disease itself. When the Mongols encountered plague-infected cities, instead of avoiding them, they saw opportunity. They would capture diseased prisoners and deliberately release them into the territories they planned to conquer next. Water supplies in besieged cities were systematically poisoned with corpses, human waste, and rotting animals. The goal wasn't just to capture the city. It was to ensure that even surrender wouldn't save the population from a slow, agonizing death. Mongol siege engines began launching something new over city walls. Not just rocks or burning pitch, but diseased corpses. Imagine being a defender on those walls, watching the bodies of plague victims arc through the air before crashing into your streets, your homes, your families. The biological impact was devastating, but the psychological impact was worse. How do you maintain hope when death literally falls from the sky? The most effective disease strategy was also the most cruel. Khan's forces would identify infected prisoners, then release them with false promises of freedom. These desperate people would flee toward nearby cities, carrying plague with them. By the time the cities realized what was happening, the disease had already spread throughout the population. Entire regions became uninhabitable not from direct warfare, but from engineered epidemics that killed slowly, painfully, and completely. Khan understood something that other conquerors missed. To truly control a territory, you had to destroy not just the people, but their ability to ever rebuild. In Central Asia, the Mongols systematically destroyed irrigation systems that had taken centuries to construct. These ancient canal networks had turned deserts into gardens, supporting millions of people. Khan's engineers didn't just damage them, they obliterated them so completely that many regions have never recovered agricultural productivity. Farmland that had fed cities for generations was deliberately converted to pastures for Mongol horses. Populations that had lived as settled farmers for thousands of years were forced to become nomads or die. This wasn't just conquest, it was forced evolution. Khan was reshaping human civilization itself. The destruction of knowledge was equally systematic. In Baghdad, the House of Wisdom contained the largest library in the world. Hundreds of thousands of books representing centuries of human learning in mathematics, medicine, philosophy, astronomy, and literature. The Mongols threw every single book into the Tigris River. The water ran black with ink for weeks. 1,000 years of accumulated wisdom dissolved into the current and disappeared forever. This happened in every major city. Libraries burned. Schools were demolished. Scholars were executed. The goal wasn't just to kill the current generation, it was to ensure that future generations would have nothing to build upon. Archaeological evidence shows that some regions experienced what experts call technological regression, lasting centuries. Areas that had sophisticated metalworking, advanced agriculture, and complex architecture were reduced to primitive subsistence living. It was as if civilization itself had been reset to an earlier stage. Khan had achieved something unprecedented in human history. He had proven that progress wasn't inevitable, that knowledge could be lost, that entire civilizations could be not just defeated, but erased so completely that archaeologists today struggle to prove they ever existed. The survivors were left with nothing. No books, no teachers, no infrastructure, no hope. Just the traumatic memory of what they had lost and the terrifying knowledge that it could all be taken away again. This level of systematic evil is almost impossible to comprehend. But here at Throne of Lies, we refuse to let these victims be forgotten. If this matters to you, if you believe these stories need to be told, then subscribe right now. We're fighting to reach 1,000 subscribers so we can continue exposing the darkest chapters of human history. Don't let their suffering be in vain. Subscribe and help us honor their memory. The industrial-scale slaughter was horrifying enough. But Genghis Khan's most revealing moments came when the killing became personal. Jamukha had been his childhood friend, his sworn brother. They had grown up together on the harsh steppes, sharing food when times were desperate, protecting each other from enemies. Khan had even formally adopted him into his family. But friendship meant nothing when it stood between Khan and absolute power. When Jamukha finally fell into his hands after years of tribal warfare, Khan could have simply executed him. A quick death for an old friend. Instead, he chose to send a message about the price of opposing him. Khan's soldiers stripped Jamukha naked and bound him to a wooden frame. Then they began breaking every bone in his body, starting with his fingers and working their way up. The process took hours. Jamukha's screams could be heard throughout the camp. But Khan wasn't finished. He wanted Jamukha to experience the same agony Khan had felt as a child when his father was poisoned. So he ordered molten silver to be prepared. They poured the liquid metal into Jamukha's eyes first. The sizzling sound as it burned through tissue and bone. The smell of cooking flesh. Jamukha's body convulsing against the restraints as his brain tried to process pain beyond human endurance. Then they poured silver into his ears. The metal eating through his eardrums, his inner ear, destroying his sense of balance and hearing before finally reaching his brain. Jamukha was still alive when they began breaking his spine, vertebra by vertebra. Khan watched every moment. This wasn't delegated to subordinates. This was personal entertainment. Even Khan's own family wasn't safe from his cruelty. His eldest son Joki had questioned some of his father's military decisions, had suggested that perhaps total extermination wasn't always necessary, had shown what Khan interpreted as weakness. Khan couldn't tolerate weakness, even from his own blood, especially from his own blood. Joki died under mysterious circumstances during a hunting expedition. The official story was an accident, but everyone in Khan's inner circle understood the truth. Khan had ordered his own son's execution because the young man had shown mercy to enemies. The genetic legacy of Khan's sexual violence tells a story almost as horrifying as his military campaigns. Modern DNA analysis has revealed that approximately 16 million men alive today carry genetic markers indicating descent from Genghis Khan. 16 million descendants from one man. This wasn't the result of natural reproduction. This was the genetic signature of systematic rape conducted on a continental scale. Khan maintained personal harems in every region he conquered. Not dozens of women, thousands. His soldiers would collect the most beautiful girls and women from each captured city and transport them to Khan's traveling court. But the sexual violence went far beyond Khan's personal gratification. He weaponized rape as a tool of ethnic destruction. His policy was explicit. Mongol soldiers had the right to rape any woman in conquered territories, regardless of age or social status. The goal was to dilute enemy bloodlines, to create a generation of mixed-blood children who would be loyal to the Mongol Empire rather than their mother's people. It was genetic warfare conducted through sexual violence. The right of first night wasn't limited to Khan himself. Every Mongol officer could claim any woman in their territory for sexual purposes. Resistance meant death not just for the woman, but for her entire extended family. Pregnant women from conquered peoples were often forced to abort their children or watch them be killed immediately after birth. The reasoning was simple. Pure-blood enemies were threats. Mixed-blood children were assets. Khan's psychological torture techniques revealed the true depth of his sadism. At starving cities, he would offer food to the population under one condition. They had to eat their own dead. Parents were forced to consume their children's flesh to survive. Husbands ate their wives. Children ate their grandparents. Khan's soldiers would watch these acts of forced cannibalism while eating their own rations, laughing at the desperate survivors who had been driven to violate the most fundamental human taboos. But even this wasn't cruel enough for Khan. He developed a new form of execution specifically for captured enemy leaders. It was called the blood eagle. The victim would be tied face down to a wooden platform. Khan's executioners would use sharp knives to cut through the ribs, carefully separating them from the spine while keeping the victim alive and conscious. Then they would pull the ribs outward like wings. The process could take hours if done correctly. The victim remained aware throughout as their own ribs were transformed into a grotesque display of suffering. Khan would often eat his meals while watching these executions, commenting on the technique and suggesting improvements to his torturers. At Samarkand, Khan ordered something that defied human comprehension. He wanted a pyramid built from living people. His soldiers selected the healthiest prisoners, those who would survive longest. They were stacked like building blocks, with the strongest at the bottom supporting the weight of those above. As people on the lower levels were crushed to death, their bodies became the foundation for additional layers. The pyramid rose 20 feet high. The people at the top were still alive, still screaming, still trying to climb down over the bodies of their friends and family members. Khan's architects used a mixture of mud and blood as mortar to hold the structure together. The pyramid stood for weeks. Khan would bring visitors to admire his creation. The screaming eventually stopped, but the smell continued for months. Even his own soldiers began avoiding the area. This was Khan's true innovation. He had turned human suffering into an art form. Every execution, every torture session, every act of sexual violence was carefully choreographed for maximum psychological impact. He wasn't just killing people. He was destroying their humanity first, forcing them to betray everything they believed about civilization and morality before finally granting them the mercy of death. And through it all, Khan remained personally involved. This wasn't a distant ruler ordering abstract violence. This was a hands-on psychopath who took genuine pleasure in the detailed mechanics of human suffering. The monster had revealed himself completely, and the world would never recover from what it had seen. 800 years have passed since Genghis Khan drew his last breath. The scars he carved into humanity have never healed. Entire regions of Central Asia remain sparsely populated to this day. Places that once supported millions of people now struggle to maintain small towns. The demographic damage was so severe that some areas never recovered their pre-Mongol population levels. Modern geneticists studying DNA patterns across Asia can still see the bottlenecks. The sudden, dramatic reduction in genetic diversity that occurs when populations are reduced to tiny numbers of survivors. These genetic signatures are permanent markers of genocide, written into our very cells. In Iran, technological development was set back by centuries. Regions that had sophisticated irrigation systems, advanced metallurgy, and complex architecture were reduced to primitive subsistence living. Some areas didn't regain their pre-Mongol technological capabilities until the 20th century. The knowledge destroyed can never be recovered. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad contained works by ancient Greek philosophers that existed nowhere else on earth. Mathematical treatises that had taken generations to develop. Medical knowledge that could have advanced human health by centuries. All of it gone. Dissolved in the Tigris River on Khan's orders. When those books disappeared, humanity became collectively less intelligent, less capable, less civilized. And yet today, if you visit Mongolia, you'll find Genghis Khan's face on their money. Statues of him tower over the capital city. The airport is named after him. He's celebrated as the founder of the nation, a source of pride and national identity. The man who killed 40 million people has been transformed into a hero. Western historians have participated in this whitewashing. They describe Khan as a great conqueror who united diverse peoples under one empire. They focus on trade routes and cultural exchange, carefully avoiding detailed discussion of the systematic genocide that made it all possible. Academic textbooks reduce the slaughter to sanitized statistics. Population decline due to warfare and disease. Administrative reorganization of conquered territories. Clinical language that obscures the reality of children being thrown from city walls and parents forced to eat their own dead. The tourism industry has built an entire mythology around Khan's legacy. Adventure tours to follow the path of the Great Khan. Luxury resorts in Mongolia that celebrate the warrior spirit of the empire. Documentaries that focus on military tactics while skipping the torture and rape. Modern Mongolia's economy depends partly on maintaining this fiction. The uncomfortable truth about their national hero would damage the tourist industry and undermine national pride. So the genocide gets minimized, the victims get forgotten, and the monster gets worshipped. This reveals something terrifying about human nature, our willingness to forgive any crime if enough time passes and the criminal achieved sufficient power. Khan succeeded so completely in his brutality that he became untouchable. The scale of his crimes was so vast that it became abstract, statistical, easy to ignore. 40 million deaths becomes just a number in a history book. The individual faces, the personal stories, the human reality gets lost in the overwhelming scope of the horror. But there's a deeper lesson here about how charisma can mask psychopathy. Khan was undeniably brilliant. He was an innovative military strategist, an effective administrator, a charismatic leader who inspired fanatical loyalty from his followers. These positive qualities didn't balance out his genocidal tendencies. They enabled them. His intelligence made him more effective at killing. His charisma gave him the power to convince others to participate in atrocities. His administrative skills allowed him to systematize murder on an unprecedented scale. The most dangerous monsters in human history aren't the obvious lunatics. They're the charming psychopaths who convince entire societies to follow them into darkness. We see this pattern repeated throughout history. Leaders who combine personal magnetism with absolute ruthlessness. who inspire devotion while orchestrating atrocities, who are remembered as great figures while their victims are forgotten. The hero worship of historical figures like Khan teaches us to admire results while ignoring methods, to celebrate power while forgetting the powerless, to focus on the winners while erasing the losers from memory. This is exactly what Khan would have wanted. His greatest victory wasn't military or political. It was psychological. He convinced future generations that his crimes were achievements, that his victims deserved their fate, that might truly does make right. Every statue erected in his honor is a monument to successful evil. Every textbook that calls him a great conqueror is propaganda written by the victor. Every tourist who visits Mongolia to celebrate his legacy is participating in the ongoing humiliation of 40 million victims. The frightening truth is that Khan's methods work. Extreme violence, systematically applied, can achieve lasting political results. Genocide can be successful if it's thorough enough. Evil can triumph if it's sufficiently organized and ruthless. This is why remembering the victims matters more than celebrating the conquerors. This is why uncomfortable truths about historical figures need to be told and retold. This is why we can't allow time and distance to transform monsters into heroes. The 40 million people Khan killed didn't die to build trade routes or unite cultures. They died because one man enjoyed killing them and had the power to do it. Their suffering wasn't meaningful. Their deaths weren't necessary. Their lives mattered more than his legacy. The fact that Genghis Khan is still celebrated today proves how desperately we need channels like Throne of Lies. We're the only ones willing to tell the full, unvarnished truth about history's monsters. If you want to be part of exposing these cover-ups, if you believe the world needs to know these stories, then subscribe right now. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers so we can continue this vital work. Every subscription is a vote for truth over comfortable lies. 40 million people. That number should haunt you. It should make you question everything you thought you knew about human nature, about power, about the thin line between civilization and savagery. This wasn't random violence or the chaos of war. This was systematic extermination conducted with industrial precision 700 years before the industrial age. Genghis Khan didn't just kill his enemies. He erased them from existence so completely that entire civilizations vanished without a trace. He proved that evil can be efficient, that cruelty can be organized, that genocide can be successful if it's thorough enough and brutal enough. And the most terrifying part? He's still winning. His victims are forgotten while his image appears on currency. His crimes are minimized while his achievements are celebrated. History has been rewritten by the victor, and the victor was a mass-murdering psychopath. This is what unchecked power looks like. This is what happens when charisma combines with absolute ruthlessness. This is the reality that comfortable lies about great conquerors are designed to hide. A throne of lies, we refuse to let history sanitize its monsters. We won't pretend that time makes genocide acceptable or that success justifies atrocity. We tell the stories that make people uncomfortable because those are the stories that matter most. The victims of Genghis Khan deserve to be remembered. The 40 million dead deserve to have their suffering acknowledged. The truth about power deserves to be told, no matter how ugly it gets. But this is just the beginning. The history books are filled with monsters disguised as heroes. Tyrants celebrated as great leaders. Genocidal maniacs transformed into national symbols. Can you handle the real history? Can you face the uncomfortable truths about the figures you were taught to admire? Are you ready to see behind the lies that protect the powerful and erase the powerless? If your answer is yes, then subscribe to Throne of Lies right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because the darkest stories are yet to come. We're going to expose them all. Every comfortable lie, every sanitized monster, every buried atrocity that the powerful don't want you to remember. The truth about power needs to be told. And we're just getting started. Subscribe now. The next brutal truth is waiting.